Okay, I guess we're going to get started. We'll call the meeting to order. And if we could all rise, Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we call the roll, people who come here often probably notice we're set up a little different. We've added a little bit more distance in between each of us to kind of mirror the aspirational best practices we have for the district. So, Mr. Scott, whose importance is in no means belied by the fact that he's all the way in the back. If you could do the roll for me.
Of course. I'm just glad to be in the room. Ms. Albright.
Here.
Mrs. Bell.
Here.
Mrs. Godfrey.
Here.
Ms. Leone.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Olson.
Here.
Mr. Scott here. Mr. Strobel.
Here.
And Mrs. Thompson.
Here.
All present.
Okay. We now are going to have the superintendent's report from Dr. Cooper.
Thank you, Madam President. You'll find on this evening's agenda an update to the health and safety plan. We'll be voting on to approve. Again, it's some minor logistical language that had to be corrected. One of the items to draw your attention to has to do with testing for folks who travel to quarantine listed states, as indicated by the governor. And it would be a 14-day quarantine or a PCR test after day 5 of return at the minimum. So it would be one of the changes. The other item is share with you what I did a little bit in the update from Friday. Is you'll remember that in mid-August, the Department of Ed for the Commonwealth, in collaboration with the Department of Health, they created dashboards for school districts across the state to utilize for purposes of instructional delivery models, recommendations with each one. And the substantial indicating that a 100 per 100,000 and or 10% or above positivity rate category would come with the recommendation from the Department of Ed as a full remote learning environment. On last Monday, Berks County superintendents met with members from the Department of Health, members from the Department of Education. They at that time indicated that the County of Berks moved into the substantial category from moderate, which is where we were placed at the start of the year, and released that information August 10th. And again, that had to do with incidents per 100,000 related to COVID-19 cases in the county. Again, the recommendation is just such that as a recommendation. And again, they emphasize that local decisions are to be made based on information that the local communities and local education agencies have to continue making those decisions for what's best for the students and families of the communities. We met again this morning as a follow-up as we are coming into the second week, or just concluding the second week of the substantial category as identified by the initial dashboard in mid-August. And again, the recommendation by the Department of Ed was the remote learning. However, again, they emphasize that it's a local education agency decision, make a decision related to any adjustments to instructional delivery models. So just to share some data with you and some information with you as a board, although the countywide data and state data continue to see an increase in incidents per 100,000 and related to COVID-19 cases. I can give you some specific information on the data that's specific to our zip codes that are part of our district, make up our district boundaries. This is information that's pulled today and updated today, and our per 100,000 incident rate with all the zip codes in our district is at 31.8, again, which is significantly below what that is at the state and the county, and also a positivity rate of 5.01%. We've been fluctuating throughout the course of the school year since we started our instructional model, instructional learning options for students and families, anywhere between 2.8 and as high as 5.8%. So we are still within the range that we've been in all along with the instructional options that we have provided for our students and families. As a superintendent and our administrative team continue to state that our current learning path and learning options that we've provided for our learners in our district is one that we would advocate for continuing with, and we will continue to monitor the data that we continue to get at our local level here within our buildings for any significant changes that would provide that additional information that would force us to revisit how we're delivering our instruction to our students. And just as a caveat, I share with you that only the Department of Health in the Commonwealth has the authority to direct districts or LEAs what to do moving forward. PDE can only make recommendations. The Department of Health is the only governing body in the state that can make a suggestion or force districts to do something outside the scope of what they already are. That concludes my report, Madam President.
All right, thank you, Dr. Cooper. Any board have any comment on any of the proposed changes to the safety plan, or do you want to leave that for when we come up on voting? Okay, thank you. Procedures for public participation are, I think, up there. I can't put my glasses on because they bug up. They have changed. Do we have any presentations by the public on any agenda items? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to announcements, agenda edits. I have one under personnel added consent items, number 6A211 is going to be removed temporarily. Not all the information is there, and so we're just going to wait until we have it all before we vote on it. Mr. Scott, do you have that? Okay. And I believe that Mr. Strobel had an agenda edit as well?
I do. I guess it would be 7.3.
Yeah.
So in regards to the legacy system, eSchool, transitioned away from that, and so there's an additional year needed. It's $3,750. Provide 3 users the ability for an additional year for read-only for purposes of validation in case of an
And the new deadline will be what, 2022 or?
I believe it's 2023, yes.
Okay. We're extending that
Data
contract.
can be changed in our system just for read-only, in case we run into a problem, we'll go back and validate.
Anybody who wasn't in the technology committee, when we get to number 7, we, you can add some color if you need to. Okay, and just to let everybody know, there will be an executive session following the meeting to discuss negotiations. Okay, moving on. Consent items, 3A1 through 6. Do I have a motion on that?
Make that motion.
Mr. Strobel, do I have a second?
I'll give you a second.
Mr. Scott, do we have any discussion on anything under the consent items? Okay, hearing none. Can we have a vote, Mr. Scott?
Ms. Albright, Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Olson.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you. Under personnel consent, we have 4A 1 through 3 inclusive. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Strobel, can I have a second? Ms. Leone, right? Yeah. Any comments, questions, concerns?
Just questions about the number 5, the salary adjustments. Is that something that was missed, or are there some kind of experience level changes, or why are we making the adjustments?
The marching band, yeah.
Extracurricular.
Yes, that was something that had to be adjusted as per the CBA. Was the numbers that were approved earlier was incorrect.
All of those people, I believe, have
Had
been,
multiple years.
yeah, they've all been here multiple
Experience.
years,
Yeah,
so.
that's what I thought.
So I thought that was the case as well. Any other concerns before we vote? Mr. Scott?
Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
and Mrs. Olson.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, under finance, added consent of 5A 1 through 4. Do I have a motion for those? Ms. Albright, do I have a second?
I'll make.
Mr. Scott? No, Mr. Scott. Is second. Any discussion on the medical plan changes, the grant, or the services agreement for psychologist staffing? Any concerns, questions? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Scott, I do know your name.
It's all good.
Okay.
Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Olson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh my God, that was loud. Okay, moving on to personnel, added consent items.
I can actually add the dates if you want me to.
Have you heard, we pulled the item.
What's that?
Agenda edit?
Did you hear that? She has dates that we
We
could
would
put.
have to
We had that.
We'd have to reinsert it.
reinsert it.
It was removed from the agenda.
Yeah, we removed it from the agenda because we didn't think we had dates.
I have the dates if you want.
We can make a motion from the floor.
Okay. What are the dates?
Approximately November 11th, and it's going to be through, the paid days will be through January 14th of 21.
Okay. All right. So let's have a motion for personnel added consent 1, 3, 4, and 5, and then we'll do 2 separately.
I'll make that motion.
1, 3, 4, and 5.
Yep.
I'll make
I just want you to work tonight, Mr. Scott.
I am, over here.
Do I have, and I heard Mr. Strobel make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Bell? Any concerns or questions about those? May I have a vote for that?
So, Ms. Personnel, 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Correct.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Olson,
Yes.
oh, I guess,
Just as a matter of a point of order, Mr. Subers, can I make a motion can we make a motion to reinstate and to vote at the same time, or does that have to be two separate motions?
It could be, well, we need to, there's new names in there.
Yep.
I think you could just make a motion to adopt item personnel consent 6A 21 with the following dates inserted.
Okay. All right, so do I have a motion to vote on 6A21, professional leave, with the added dates, with the leave to fall from November 11th, 2020, through January 14th, 2021. Do I have a motion to vote on that?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Scott, do I have a second?
Second, Mrs. Bell.
Okay, Ms. Bell. All right, so,
We're gonna vote.
yeah,
All right, so just so I get it right, motion to adopt 6A21, professional lead or added date, and then what are the dates, or?
November 11th, 2020 is the first date,
11. Okay,
and then the through date is January 14th, 2021. Thank you, Ms. Weems.
Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
Miss Olson.
Yes.
All right, I guess.
Okay, moving on to program added consent, 7A, 1 and 2. Do I have a motion for those?
Make that motion.
Mr. Strobel, do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Albright? We didn't get it, I guess we did discuss the Special Olympics MOU at the last meeting, after the extracurricular meeting, so that was discussed with the board, I remember. Everybody heard the reasons for the changes that are being suggested by advocated for by the, recommended, I guess is the best word, by the administration for the school health and safety plan.
Could we recap?
Yeah, on page, oh, of course, I just deleted it. On page 30, page 30. And that is not right. Page 27. 27. On page 27, it used to say, no one will be permitted to enter the buildings who has traveled to one of the states that the Pennsylvania Department of Health has indicated a need for quarantining until they have fulfilled a 14-day quarantine period or they provide a negative COVID-19 test. Now, there is a little bit more requirement. There's a requirement for a specific type of test, which is considered to be the most accurate one that's readily available, and that you have to wait 5 days before providing that test, because you can come home and you can be exposed to the virus and still not, and present negative, and present positive after several days. So this is the recommendation from the Department of Health now.
Is that instead of quarantine for 14 days?
Yeah, so it used to be, instead of quarantining for 14 days, we said you could provide a negative COVID test right away. But it's
5
that,
days,
it's the
specific.
type of test and giving a little bit of that grace period time. So that's your other option. What was the other?
We're putting just a little bit of an extra measure in there, for safety purposes, especially since we're starting to see increased incidence in the county and state. So
Were there any other changes?
What type of, so it's a change to molecular PCR test, is that the change?
And also, it used to say that you could get a test, like for example, if you went on a trip, you could get the test like the day you came home, and as soon as you got the negative result, you could send your kid back to school, but it has to be dated, the test has to be taken 5 days after you get home.
Is that test free to everybody, that specific test? I'm just worried about low-income families that can't pay for that if they don't have insurance in place.
Well, everybody who goes here has to have at least chip insurance. Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that specific test is.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Okay.
The molecular test, is that the like one that takes 2 to 5 days to come back?
I don't know. I don't know how long someone would have to have.
I can add a little bit of that if you want.
Yep.
There's an antigen test right now, which those are the rapid response ones that come back like literally in an hour.
Yeah.
They are becoming more prevalent. They are significantly less, and I'm not a doctor,
Right.
guys, but
No,
my
I understand.
understanding of it is they're significantly less accurate than the PCR test, which are the most accurate that are out there. It takes a few days, and again, I'm not a doctor or a nurse. It allows, I guess, for the virus to build up in the body, so it increases the likelihood that you don't get a false result from that test. I hope that adds a little bit of information.
I want to also follow what Mr. Hurley is indicating about being a physician. We're doing the best we can to take a look at, come through pages and pages of data or information, and we're being asked to try to make decisions on keeping our students and our staff and our community as safe as possible during this unfortunate event, global pandemic. So, taking that information, again, we're not physicians, but we're trying to do the best we can so that our students can continue to come into our schools in what we feel is the best environment would be in an in-person environment.
And there was another change, I thought.
I believe that, I don't know if there was any specifics with it, there might have been some vernacular change.
There's some, the CDC just came out with a little more clarification and guidance in regards to the being within 6 feet for 15 minutes. CDC just came out and they're saying being within 6 feet for 15 minutes is considered a close contact within a 24-hour period rather than just a straight block. That type of language was included in multiple spots in the plan itself.
And also with regard to that information, again referencing the meeting that we had as countywide superintendents with the Department of Health, we are seeking further clarification and guidance from the department at the state level on exactly what, how those impacts or how that would impact, the contact tracing moving forward. Should we or when we get positive cases, and how to appropriately act in response to those.
Any other discussion about the recommended changes? Would it make sense for us to vote on them separately? I mean, we'll go ahead and vote on them together unless somebody says they don't want to.
Julie, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, you bet.
just to the administration for like the high school to go back in person completely, at what point in our guidelines that we already have are we looking at that?
At this point, our recommendation is continue to do what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm talking about that in the
Yeah.
future, like at what point will we be able to do that if things start to improve?
I mean, I'm not sure, I can make that recommendation now based on the information that we have. I don't have a date set, in my mind as far as when we can advocate for that. Our two levels are pretty significantly different as far as how we co-order our students in their respective environments according to the plan we have now.
Yeah, I was meaning like the numbers, like so the numbers that you were talking about, is there like a specific number that we're looking for, or is it just, like,
We don't have any numbers set in the safety plan.
Okay, that's
as to what per incident per 100K the positivity rate is. That's not significantly established.
because I know some parents have kind of asked that question, so I'm going to ask.
Any
Is
other?
that great, please?
Yeah, we can do that. Okay, so can we amend the previous motion to vote for just number one, the MOU for Special Olympics?
Yes, I can make that.
Yeah, and then Ms. Albright was the second on that. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just vote. We're gonna just vote on number one. Again, Mr. Scott, keeping you on your toes.
Okay, so we're doing a 7A1.
Yep.
Okay. Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson.
Yes. Okay, and then now, can we get a motion to vote on a 7A2?
Well, I think we have the motion as amended, it was broken into the two parts, and now we just.
Now
have
we're
a
on
separate
two.
vote.
Okay. Is there any further discussion before we vote on that, or did everybody get their questions answered that they had? Okay, Mr. Scott?
7A2, correct?
Yep.
Okay, and who had the first motion?
It was still Mr. Strobel, Mrs. Albright.
Mrs. Albright, okay,
Mhm.
fair enough. Okay. Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
No.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
and Mrs. Olson.
Yes.
We have 2 noes, 7 yeses.
Okay, under old business, we have a couple of,
We have 7A3.
73.
Sorry, wait a minute. Mr.
oh, that
Strobel.
was, I'm so sorry, Mr. Strobel's lonely additional motion. So do I have a motion to
I'll make
vote
that
on
motion.
783? And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Miller. Can you provide a little bit of color for the folks that were not in the technology committee meeting? I know you did it once already, but
We have a legacy system, which is eSchool. We have a new system, which is called Infinite Campus. So the transition's been complete. It's been going very well, actually. So what we need to do is be able to get into the system and look at that data as we move forward for the next year, just in case there's any problems. So it's a view only. You can't add anything to it. It will be moved over. And so it's a one-time fee for 3 users to have up to 1 year to be able to validate in case there's any mistakes. And then we'll cut the chain.
okay.
That's what it was.
What's the additional expense
It's $37.50
for the year?
for the year.
Anyone else have any other questions for either Dr. Cooper or for Mr. Strobel on that before we vote? I am sorry, Mr. Strobel. Mr. Scott?
7A3, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Olson.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. Under old business, 9A, 1 and 2, we have 2 meeting minutes to approve. A motion for that.
I'll make the motion.
So Mr. Scott, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Strobel? Any comments, concerns about the minutes? Mr. Scott?
Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just one item under new business, 10A1. Do I have a motion for updating a policy 707?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Scott, do I have a second?
Second, Mrs. Bell.
Mrs. Bell. If I could just ask Mr. Hurley to give just a brief discussion, explanation of why we needed to make these changes right now.
Yeah, basically, in a nutshell, what we need to do, our facilities use rental policies need to be modified so that we're taking into account COVID-19. In short, basically the level 2 and level 3 applicants for facility use will not be able to do that. Basically, it'll be our local groups, examples, Amity Basketball, there's a mat club, Laser Mat Club that runs our facilities. They will still be able to in the winter. It needs to be done in a timely manner so that, number one, we don't have outside groups trying to run our facilities, and number two, we had to come up with some guidelines for our local community who couldn't run their programs if we didn't provide access to these facilities. The modifications we did make in regards to COVID, and this was the policy committee along with Mr. Scott, was that we weren't going to allow access to our middle school and our high school gymnasiums because if they do get a COVID case, we have to shut down that area for 24 hours and spray it down. We didn't want to disrupt interscholastic sports. However, at the elementary and all of our other gymnasiums, including over at River Rock, it wouldn't disrupt our interscholastic sports. If there was a COVID, there's other clauses in there, as you can see, I don't need to read each one, but there's things in there. If there's a COVID case, the group is responsible for the spraying, the cost of spraying out of the facility. That type of stuff is there. They have to come up with their own health and safety plans, and they need to comply with our general guidelines that we have set forth as a school district.
Any board members have any questions about the changes that are being put forth in the revised policy before we vote? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Scott?
This is 10A1, Mrs. Albright,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Godfrey,
Yes.
Mrs. Leone,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Scott, yes. Mr. Strobel,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson.
Yes.
All yeses.
Okay, do we have any presentations by the public on any issue?
I'm gonna type it so I don't forget.
That's okay.
But then it's one thing on the second. My name's Megan Owens. You need to know who wants to
You just need to address.
18 Terry Court. Most of my questions regard transportation. I wanted to just clarify something. In the state health and safety plan, it says that the drivers are to be sanitizing the buses in between runs. Does this mean between your high school and your elementary school, or your middle school and your elementary school, or do you mean at the end of the AM run and at the end of the PM run? No, the answer.
I I do. Do you have any, I'm writing down all your questions. Do you have
Sorry.
more?
Yeah, I do. Okay. When there is a COVID case on the bus, the school bus drivers don't seem to be quarantining. I was just wondering why we quarantine the whole bus, but not the driver. Okay. And then we have an increase of students attending in school. How are we going to address that with school buses, which are currently limited to 2 per seat, 44 per bus?
I'm sorry, I did not hear the whole of that last question.
My last question?
Yeah,
It
I
was
apologize. I did not hear the whole of that last question.
No worries. Just with the amount of students that are switching to be in person, how is the busing situation going to be addressed since we are limited at 44 students per
Right. We have not changed the requirements for the side. I'm going to go backwards. We haven't changed the 44 students per bus. We had a long conversation at the Transportation and Facilities Committee meeting this month about exactly what you said, because as more and more kids want to come are coming back, we have to maintain that distance. It's because it protects the driver and because it's what's being recommended by the Department of Health. But that means we'll have to be bringing more buses in, and when that happens, costs are incurred, and also it can significantly disrupt everyone else's bus ride, because some kids might get new buses and things like that. We are working on it.
And there's a bus driver shortage.
And yeah, exactly. And so both of our transportation providers were here at the meeting, and those are ongoing conversations. I don't know if any buses at this point are over 44 kids per bus.
They are not, and we've asked
Not yet.
our transportation contract service providers to take a 2-week snapshot of daily ridership in both the AM and PM routes to get the actual ridership number of students that are on. That way we can see what the gap is on a consistent basis between number of assignments and number of actual riders in each one of those, so they can give us a better snapshot of where we are and potential impact it can have on the need for just need to add additional runs or additional buses.
Okay. And
And then COVID case on the bus. When we have a COVID case within our student body, we go to Department of Health, and they provide contact tracing assistance to us, and we tell them this is where that child was, this is what his or her day looks like, and they direct us with their best advice of who should quarantine and who should not. So if they decided that the driver wasn't going to be quarantining, I'm not 100% sure why, but that was their recommendation. The drivers have if they had to quarantine, they have as much, right to that federally, available sick leave, so it's not like they're out of work, they're out of money, if they have to quarantine. But when we had one case, now if there was a case that they had determined that the bus driver also had to quarantine, that would be a different thing. But when we had the one case so far where we had to quarantine, we had to request that some of the kids that contacted that other student on a bus, they did not recommend that the bus driver quarantine. So we are basically deferring to the health professionals with help to decide who is being recommended to quarantine and who isn't through their assistance with contact tracing.
And again, until recently, when the latest information came out from the Center of Disease Control, it was a 615 indication of what they were using for their decisions they were making. When we are in contact with the Department of Health, that's typically the first question that they have for us is the inside 6 foot for a 15-minute time limit consecutively. Now, keep in mind that with that new additional information from CDC and what is now health and safety plan, that is, gap is widened to a 24-hour time period. So, and again, I just indicated earlier in my comments, the Department of Health is yet to provide guidance to us relevant to that CDC information, and we're still waiting for that. And as for meetings that we had with them this morning, they indicated that hopefully they'll have something in a couple of days to us.
And do drivers sanitize between runs from building to building, or just at the beginning of the day and end of the day? I don't know that answer.
Yes, Mr. Hurley,
I don't know
that might be
that
something
answer.
we have to get back to them on. I'm not sure what our indication on that is.
Is there a sheet there for you to put your name? We will get back to you with that answer, because I don't know it.
Can I just circle back real quick about the bus runs? I know there's still virtual kids showing up on the bus runs, so this is obviously going to be an issue when you have kids actually coming into school. So aside from the virtual kids, what about the kids who are still on the bus runs but who aren't riding? I know personally, I have 3 kids riding buses. One does not ride; she has a ride from the neighbor, but I haven't told her in case the neighbor's kid is sick. But technically, my kid doesn't ride a bus, so she's holding a seat that could potentially go to another kid. So this does affect me, but
Right. And that was
general-
part of the discussion we had at the last meeting. There are people who, at the beginning of the school year, we asked all the parents, would you be willing to opt out of transportation for the whole year? And we had some people take advantage of it, and not everybody did. Where we run into issues is that if, that parent has to count on, I'm never going to have my kid on the bus, and what holds a lot of parents back from, not wanting to have the option to have a seat on the bus is what happens if there's an early dismissal. What happens if there's snow and it's a late arrival or whatever. And so we're trying to work through those issues and see if we can get a better handle on who actually needs a seat on the bus. It's a much bigger problem I shouldn't say problem. It's a much bigger puzzle than I thought it was at the beginning of the year. And I've never sat on the transportation committee. I know several people who are here have, and I did not realize how complicated it was. But we are trying to work with that. But those are the reasons why we haven't been able to get to the point where we can get more families to say, we'll definitely not have our child ever on the bus, where we then, as you said, had that seat open for another student to make up that 44 that could ride. And so it's a known issue, but we're not there yet.
And with the virtual kids that are still,
We should be fixing that, but I don't know when that will be resolved. Yeah, thank you, but we'll get back to you on that other question. And I appreciate the few other folks normally I know it's 3 minutes, but there's only 3 of you, and I knew that she just had a couple questions. Thank you for being patient while we talked longer than 3 minutes. I appreciate it. So do we have any other comments from members of the public? Okay, seeing none. Just a reminder that from me that I won't see you guys again until after November 3rd. So everybody, just make sure to vote. I don't care who you vote for. Just do your civic duty, because it's important that we take part. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
And a second.
Yes, I'll second.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.